It's time for fun, learning, commentary, laughs, and more. Care of the most diverse group in the genealogy and family history world. Welcome to BlackProGen Live with your hosts, Nika and True, and the baddest panel in these pedigree streets Angela, James, Linda, Alex, Ellen, Tony, Shelly, Teresa, Bernice, Felicia, Willie, Renata, and Tasia. It's BlackProGen Live, genealogy, family history research with flavor.
Hello and good evening. Welcome to your weekly dose of genealogy with seasoning with Black ProGen Live. My name is True Lewis, your co-host for the evening, and I want to welcome everyone out there tuning in from all over. I've seen a lot of states and countries and taking your time out on this Tuesday night to talk genealogy and family history. So now I'm going to turn over the mic to your host, Nika Smith.
Hello, Wakanda Forever.
Yay!
Everybody should have assumed the position of the crossed arms across the chest. If you have not, you probably have not seen the movie, but that's all right. That is all right. Thank you so much for joining us on your busy week this February 20th, 2018. I'm Nika Smith here, your host of Black ProGen Live. We are so grateful that you've taken your time out for genealogy and family history research with flavor. All right. Its records go way beyond labor contracts, and it wasn't ever a bank. Discover the origins, history, and how to properly search for the documents that make up one of the most important record sets created during the Reconstruction time period, the Bureau of Refugee, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. Thanks for joining us for our 52nd episode of Black ProGen Live entitled Deconstructing the Freedmen's Bureau. Do you love or hate the new look and feel of the show? You have a question or a comment? Join the conversation now. Participate in the live chat on YouTube to the top right hand of the screen if you're watching on a computer and at the bottom of the YouTube app on your mobile device. You can also weigh in on Twitter by tweeting us at BlackProGen or using the hashtag BlackProGen. Have you been like, oh, shucks, I can't believe I missed that episode live. I need reminders. Well, here's your reminder to set them. All you need to do is head to my YouTube page and click Set Reminder under the episode you're interested in, or simply subscribe to my channel and you'll get a reminder each and every time we go live. Since 2013, the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute has provided an amazing learning experience for genealogists and researchers. The Institute, also commonly known as MAGGIE, is the only African American focused event offering a total of 48 classes over 3 days, offering a comprehensive genealogical educational experience of benefit for the beginner, the intermediate researcher, and the professional. Join us from July 10th through the 12th, 2018 at the Genealogy Center at the Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana for the 5th installment of MAGGIE, the Teaching Institute. For more information and to register, please visit maggieinstitute.org. All right. Quick intros. Everybody come off mute. Let's go ahead and get this party started. Let's start with the person to my left on my screen. That would be the heiress in red, Angela Walton Raji.
Yay.
Hello. Out here on the eastern seaboard, right off the Chesapeake Bay.
All right, next up is Bernice Alexander Bennett.
Hello, everyone. I'm here in Maryland also. Glad to see everyone in the chat room tonight.
All right, next up is resident white chromosome, James Morgan III.
Good evening. I'm James Morgan III, coming to you from an undisclosed location in Wakanda, and I'm happy to be here on Black ProGen once again.
I think we're all coming from Wakanda tonight. All right, next up is the lady in blue, Miss Zeta Phi Beta herself.
Oh, that
Renata
must be
Yarbrough.
me. Good evening, everybody. This is Renata Yarbrough Sanders coming at you from Newport News, Virginia.
All right, more Virginians. Our other lady in blue, this time dark blue, Dr. Shelley Murphy. Okay, she says, all right, keep it moving along. Tony Carrier is next.
Hey, everybody. I'm Tony Carrier from the Center for Family History at the International African American Museum in Charleston.
All right, last but least, my co-host, the lady in Wakandan gray tonight.
Yeah, I'm rocking my Black Panther tonight. Everybody's got their BlackProGen shirts on, and mine's is in the suitcase already.
True has packed herself for Roots Tech already. She's a week ahead of time.
I commend
It'll
her.
never
I can't.
fail. I'll leave something behind and be trying to run somewhere to get something. So I'm doing it all now so I don't have to worry about all that. But it's so good to see everybody out there. I'm here at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and just great to be here.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. The chat room has been flying by for the last half an hour. They got in there early this evening, you guys.
Yeah.
Lots of chatters out there. Want to send a shout out, aloha, to Beverly Scruggs, who is joining us from Hawaii. That's awesome. I don't know if we've ever had anybody come from Hawaii. Maybe Kalani, when he joined us for the Getting Started with Asian American Research. I think he's the only other person we've had from Hawaii. Sir Leprechaun Rabbit, our Twitter Bay, is on here for the evening. Harold Motley, Adrian Wells, Wanda Looney, coming from Alabama. Sir Leprechaun is in Alberta, Canada. I did not know that until tonight. That's interesting. Got our good friend Janice Lovelace. She's joining us from Seattle. We've got, lots of Trisha Blount from DC. Our good friend Regina Calloway from the Oakland chapter of the Wakanda Nation. Shannon Christmas, Diana James Winder. There's a lot of folks joining us. Beth Wiley, another genealogy babe. We'll be seeing her next week at Roots Tech. A lot of folks joining us for tonight. Richmond, Texas. My cousin Stephanie Johnson. Yes, she's part of the Trash 250. What's up, girl? Genealogy Girl Talk says, hey, True, with the exclamation point.
Hey, I see my DAR sister Marion out there too from Boston.
All right, we got a lot of folks here. So tonight's subject matter, near and dear to our hearts. There's no way we could do another Black History Month and not talk about the Freedmen's Bureau, right? Huge, substantial record set, right? You know, people tend to think that it's a bank. Angela is going to be the number one person on here arguing, you better stop saying that. She's already got her hand to her head because she already knows. Yes. Please do not say it's a bank. But we're going to have some slides we're going to talk about tonight and a lot of different other things. So I'll start off first with a question. So the first question of the evening is, why do so few people know about the Freedmen's Bureau? Like when we're talking about genealogy, right? People bring up the census. They'll bring up, birth and death certificates. They'll bring up, even, I don't know, deeds or whatever else. But people hardly ever talk about the Freedmen's Bureau. Why do you think so few people know about it?
I think that's changing, really. I think that, before Family Searches Project to digitize and index the records, they were so hard to access. Being, only on microfilm, or to say not on microfilm at the National Archives. And, and they were hard to penetrate once you did get to them because you had to read the research guides and then go into the microfilms. Now that's changing. I think I find that a lot of people are much more aware of the Freedmen's Bureau records than I've seen in the past.
I would agree with that. I know in the past, when we recommend, for example, guidebooks for people to use, you will find that the Bureau might be mentioned, but maybe only in passing. And that was because of a limitation in accessibility. Before they were microfilmed, and about 10 or 15 years ago, the only place to see them was at the National Archives. Then they became microfilmed, but they are one roll of microfilm can contain over 1,200 images. Few people are going to go and pull up a reel of 1,200 unindexed, unsorted images. So I think, again, it's changed a bit, but accessibility has been a difficult obstacle for many in terms of this record group. And if you hear me refer to record group 105, that's the same thing. So yeah, I would just throw that out.
I think that there's also a stigma attached to it a little bit too, because of the name. It's commonly referred to as the Freedmen's Bureau, and so it automatically becomes "quote unquote" a black thing, so to speak. When in fact we know that, and I guess we'll talk about tonight, that it wasn't just for freedmen, meaning former slaves. That there are a number of other situations where persons' records and information may end up in there. So I think if you call it by its full proper name, then people get a better understanding of what were the different demographics of people that may have been affected by it or may have been interacted with this organization.
And I also want to say, because Miss Selma Stewart is in the chat room down in Hampton Roads, the Virginia records were indexed and available since 2011. So I agree with what everyone is saying, but we did have our records ready and indexed. And also I agree with James about the somewhat of a myth that they're black records, and not realizing that the refugees probably catered to the poor whites. And, during that time, I don't know what the percentage is of white to, African Americans that access the records, but I imagine there weren't all rich folks in the counties that we're researching that the poor whites didn't access, those records just like everybody else.
I want to follow up on that. The official name of the Bureau is the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. The landowners, the wealthy landowners, are in those records. They are the ones who owned the lands that were abandoned.
Sure.
In the state of Arkansas, you find, for example, oaths of allegiance before the lands were returned in many counties, especially in the western part of the state. Before they could access their lands that had been abandoned again, they had to swear oaths of allegiance to the state, considering that they had obviously seceded and were fighting against the U.S. And so one can find, if one has ancestors who were landowners, plenty of records reflecting their ancestors as well. So it's important to remember that.
Yeah, Selma was correcting me, adding, I don't have rich white folks in my tree, so I researched the poor white folks in the Freedmen Bureau records. Why are you laughing? I'm telling the truth. So that's who I associate in the records. And again, knowing who's in there is a critical fact, because people, like James said, they think it's a black record, and it's not.
Yeah.
So we got poor whites and wealthy whites in there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, Tony, I'm going to go ahead and show the intro slides that you have for, just a brief overview of Freedmen's Bureau. Okay, let me go ahead and present these to everybody. All right, go on ahead, Tony.
Oh, me? Okay. Well, the Freedmen's Bureau was established in 1865, March 3rd, by the War Department. Before that, the occupying Union forces had been carrying out much the same functions that the Bureau would carry out once the Bureau had been established. So it grew out of military operations in the occupied southern states. The Bureau operated between 1865 and 1872, when it was disbanded by Congress. And as Angela said, the official name of the Bureau is the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, but it's commonly called the Freedmen's Bureau. These were the duties of the Freedmen's Bureau. They were basically just responsible for supervising all affairs related to freedmen and refugees. And as we discussed earlier, Shelley and Angela, the refugees were most often poor whites. And then they were also responsible for overseeing, listing, inventorying, and managing the affairs of all the abandoned plantations and other properties that they found when they occupied the southern states.
There's a question from the chat room about why the Bureau was disbanded. Can you talk about that a little bit, Tony?
I haven't read extensively about that, but I think at that point, perhaps the Congress felt that things were sufficiently along in the former slaveholding states where they didn't need an actual government presence in the Bureau per se.
Yeah, and I think the compromise, I want to say, was that around the same time period, or that was later? That was later, but it was because it was the military.
Mm-hmm.
They, it's like, oh, we're going to stay occupying your city for a whole decade.
Right.
And people were like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm pretty sure.
It is important. Yeah, I was just going to say, it is important to understand that this is a military record set, and the staff, if you want to call it staff, the people who worked in the Bureau, distributing rations, dealing with things in the Freedmen's Court, whatever the issues were, they were military, they were soldiers. Mm-hmm. And very correctly, soldiers cannot continue to occupy the South in a now reunited states. At some point in time, the military has to also move out. But it's also important to understand, too, in terms of the people, those who have ancestors who were Union Army registered, and I'm not referring to U.S. colored troops, I'm referring again, another portion of those whites in the Bureau were the staff who were part of the military, the officers who ran those field offices. So it's important to understand that as well.
All right, moving on. So we talked about the fact that it was connected to, the supervision of affairs related to freedmen and refugees, which of course is indigent whites. We have to keep reiterating that point over and over and over and over again. This is not the Black people's record set. Yes.
That's what I said.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, like a big part of it is, but it's not, that's just like saying the census is just for white people. No, it doesn't quite work like that. So we have to keep reiterating that, you will find white folks in these records. In fact, Shannon Christmas was in the chat room and said that the most of the stuff he found early on was on white people. It wasn't even on Black folks.
Right.
All right. So moving on, we've got one other slide. Tony,
Okay.
go ahead.
So in the responsibility of supervising all affairs related to freedmen, they were called upon to do a variety of things. And these are some of the activities that they carried out in the occupied states. Number one, they were responsible to safeguard the freedmen's rights and welfare, meaning that they basically were the only advocate and at times the only voice of freedmen who were formerly enslaved in those states. And then there were massive operations carried out to provide medical care and subsistence in the form of food rations. The agents were also responsible to oversee labor contracts to make sure that they were fair and equitable to the freedmen. If they were not, the agent was called in to settle disputes. Now, disputes could be a lot of things. It could be someone who refuses to give a freedman his wife and children. It could be a disagreement over the crop division at the end of the year. It could be a disagreement over terms of the labor contract. Well, the Freedmen's Bureau agent was responsible for handling that. And then another thing that the Freedmen's Bureau did quite a bit of was help to reunite families who had been separated by time and miles at the end of the war.
All right. And something else that Renata just went and looked at, since this definitely, it's a good question though. It's saying basically, due to lack of funding, worker support, and resistance, the Bureau was shut down in 1872 to the dismay of many whom it affected. By 1870, the Bureau had been considerably weakened due to the rise of the Ku Klux Klan violence in the South. In 1872, Congress abruptly abandoned the program, effectively shutting down the Bureau. By refusing to approve renewal legislation, it did not inform Howard, who had been transported. So basically, it's just saying that it was almost like if we just shut down the Mueller investigation right in the middle of it, even though people are dependent on it. Hey, come on now. I'm trying to keep it current, right? Even if people are dependent on it, right? Or if we just shut down the WIC program and we didn't give an explanation to the people who had become dependent on it for the dairy needs of their children, if we just decide to shut down food stamps, anything, any sort of social program like that, if we just decide to abruptly shut it down and these people are just basically left to their own devices at that particular point in time. So something that we need to talk about, of course, as well in this discussion is why was the Bureau an important part of Reconstruction? And this is to me, this is probably the most important part of this discussion outside of what are the best records. And the reason why I say that is a lot of times folks are so eager to get behind the brick wall of 1870, they don't even factor in those 5 years plus right after the war ended and after the 13th Amendment. They just jump from 1870 and they want to get back to 1800 or to Africa. It's like they skip an entire millennium of time. And so I just want to throw the question out again, why was the Bureau an important part of Reconstruction? Because I mean, we had 1860 census, 1870. Why do we care about 1865? Why do we care about the middle?
There's a lot of living that went on between 1865 and 1870. And, that was also a time of great upheaval in those former slaveholding states. So that newly freed,
Right.
formerly enslaved people were actually emerging into a state of chaos, basically governmental chaos. There were, ill feelings in the countryside. There were food insecurities. There was a lot that went on between 1865 and 1870. If you want to know where your family was before 1870, find out everything you can learn about them during Reconstruction.
Right. Also, you saw a lot of movement. You saw a lot of movement during that period of time. You saw for the first time freedmen expecting to be paid for the work that they were doing. And you also found others who did not want to pay them. And that's where labor contracts came on. You had people who needed to find housing, who needed food. They needed the support. And that's one of the reasons the Bureau was there, to provide that support as they went through that transition period.
I want to add to that. It's been over 150 years since the Civil War ended, and there's no one alive who has any memory of the chaos that war can wreak, the havoc that it can wreak on the local community. In addition to that, imagine living from, not only Maryland, because there were slaves north of the Mason-Dixon line, but let's still just say Maryland all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Suddenly, prior to the end of the war, if you were enslaved, there is no way you can walk down the street on a country road without a pass, without permission of the master to take whatever to Mr. So-and-so down the road. You have to have permission. Suddenly, 4 million people are free. That is why when you look at old illustrations from Harper's Weekly, you see people on the roads, you see people this was a shock. Imagine you're a poor dirt farmer who's not a person enslaved, who's not Black. Suddenly you see all these Black people on the road. I'm sure that was an adjustment, a major adjustment. And of course, when you have 4 million people taking to the roads, some in contraband camps, some in hospitals, some in encampments. Suddenly you have, when people are in close quarters without sanitation, you have disease, you have measles, you have cholera, you have yellow fever. It was a real public health crisis. And we don't have anyone who remembers that crisis that suddenly took place in every state from Fort Monroe all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And there was a need for assistance for these individuals, once enslaved, now freed, but in a state, certainly, of crisis and needing help.
Yeah, the other thing about it that I think people also have to remember is that just because somebody surrenders at a courthouse in Appomattox doesn't necessarily mean that anything changes for you day to day, And so by the Freedmen's Bureau coming to your particular area, soldiers coming and occupying the area and what have you, that's the thing that ultimately ends up securing emancipation for those who were formerly enslaved. And like everyone else has already said, also helps set up the social infrastructure for them to kind of be integrated into the legal and social society in which we live. So, for example, in my own family, I found a marriage record of some ancestors of mine where they got married. Legally speaking, their marriage was recognized, I think, 1868, something like that. But in their actual document, they said they'd been married for like 25 years already, but it was a slave marriage, you know. So that's a great asset for me as a descendant, because I had no idea that they had been married that long prior to, but that's a document that's now on public record as a matter of historical fact and documentation. Had that not occurred, I'd be sitting there going, I wonder when they got together. I wonder when. But that's the importance for you as a researcher.
Another
I was just
situation.
going to say that kind of everything I was going to say was said, but I wanted to use the word structure because I think that the Freedmen's Bureau brought some structure to a time of transition. And I was mentioning to the panelists before the show that I haven't found any of my family members named yet. But there's a series of letters I actually have on my blog called Letters from Lewisburg, where a white citizen is actually writing repeatedly to the Freedmen's Bureau about the condition of the freed slaves in the county, and just kind of like trying to get help, trying to get assistance. He's also afraid. You could tell that he's fearful about all of these formerly enslaved people that are just kind of not having anything to do yet. So, you know, you also get just a really good idea of what the times were like in the area that you might be researching.
Something I would also add would be a lot of the activities legitimize the freedmen as people. Right? These were acts that they were kept from participating in. You know, whether it's solemnizing your marriage, whether it's being paid for work, right? These are things that we take for granted, right? You know, this check sitting on my desk, right? I expected to be paid for this work, right? Where this was a new process to be able to have an expectation that you should be able to enact these rights and to do these things. So it was a legitimization of 4 million people. I mean, just imagine, that's like more than the population of Los Angeles, right? Literally just being released.
That's right.
Out.
Yeah.
You know,
but you also,
go ahead,
also had to have some kind of enforcement power, because if you didn't, then everyone would be put right back into bondage. And so someone had to oversee what was going on at all of those plantations and what was happening to the freedmen at that particular time.
That's right. The agency was the only advocate, really. You know, I mean, you have to think about the Martin Luther King quote, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. And, you know, to that I would add, or their government appointed advocate. So and that's what the Bureau was.
The equivalent of like the ACLU, the ADL. It's like literally, it's like 50 organizations that we have now basically was housed in just the Freedmen's Bureau. And that, I mean, also think about the scale of this, you all. I mean, this is really sort of like granted, I'm not super big on military, but this is big. This is pre-military bases, right? That we have set up all over the place. The field
social services.
Yeah.
Welfare.
It's basically a social service office. It was, that's just wow. So let's talk about, if anybody doesn't have anything else they want to add to this.
Yeah, one thing.
Okay.
How many didn't make it? Didn't get to that Freedmen Bureau record. I just don't want us to forget about them. Some of them didn't make it. Everybody, we're talking about the input and the control. You got the military, but you also got those plantations. It wasn't easy giving up those folks and letting the 4 million walk off. I imagine, I can't even come up with a number, but there were some that couldn't make it and didn't make it.
The chat room's got some really good questions here. Natural, oh Lord, I don't even know how to say her maid. I'm just gonna call you NB.
Natural
Boosie. I guess that's what we're going to call her,
That
NB.
works.
She says, but what was the benefit of the government and whites when creating the Freedmen's Bureau for the newly freedmen? The country was destabilized. You had to have something that recreated structure, or that
Right.
it's like if we just let, we just literally said, forget the levees and let's just let the Mississippi River just flow everywhere. No, not for the infrastructure. It just wasn't. She said her name was Naturally Curly. Okay, so apparently I needed to translate.
That's a translation.
well, also too, you got to think about it for selfish reasons for the government. Also, a revolution, as the Confederacy would have called the Civil War a revolution, right? But the United States government, that's a rebellion. These are still Americans, and these are American cities that need to now be rebuilt, restructured, or what have you. And so now that you've released this population of 4-point-something million people into the electorate, into the citizenry, right? How are you going to tax people if you don't even know who they are or where they exist? Or, like everyone else has already said, this is the upheaval of social society at that time. So, how do we even get to the point of electing these Reconstruction era politicians if we have no idea how many voters are in a particular voting district? You need to begin to, get those structures in order. The train lines are all jacked up because of the war. You name it, these things had to get fixed, and the Freedmen's Bureau was a big part in helping to get that stuff together.
I agree. We have a couple good questions from the chat room. Is there any way to guess the ratio of Blacks who were served, and really just people who were served by the Freedmen's Bureau? I don't even really know if you can even really quantify that because of just the amount. Unless you total up the amount of total, capital that was spent, maybe.
I think that's difficult for a number of reasons, because the records, for every record type, you have, rations that were given. You have individuals in the freedmen schools, in the hospitals, but you also have complaints. And many of those letters and those outrages and those murders and those attacks and those brutal assaults on the newly freed population, many of those, they're not on a list. And so no one has ever really made an analysis of the numbers. Of course, it is known that in 1860 census, there were 4 million plus people who were enslaved and in the census. And of course, 4 million plus people who were later freed. But the field offices did not exist in every community. Correct. Where there were people enslaved. There are if you go to mappingthefreedmensbureau.com, where we have a marker on every field office, you can zoom in on communities in multiple states where there was not a field office for 200 miles. Yeah. And there were people who were desperately in need. So it's really difficult. Now, some people may have traveled to get to a field office, but that can't really be determined. It's really difficult.
All right. Anything else before? Actually, there was one other question. How do you function in freedom if you have never done it before?
Excellent question.
Well, we survive.
You function. You do what you think you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
And that's make decisions for yourself and not have somebody else make those decisions.
It takes courage to do that. Imagine
they survive.
You cannot read, write, or count. Yet you know that in that basic human spirit inside of you, you have to get that courage to step up and to now ask people who look like the people who enslaved you, I want to get my child back.
Yes.
Can you get my child? To have the courage to do that. They had no power a year before when they saw their child carted away on a wagon. But now they are now given that freedom. Certain obstacles are removed. Now they have a chance to go and reclaim their family. What courage that took. We come from these courageous people. It's incredible.
Yeah. On a recent episode of Ben Franklin's World, there was an author on there, and the lady was the slave woman who who was captured and taken, she went to court telling about, and she kept repeating it, not worried about her current circumstances. She kept trying to tell the judge about being snatched and leaving the baby who was sucking from her breast. And she was trying to get that situation across versus what was currently happening, that they were trying to claim she's supposed to be free or whatever it was. But she talked about that loss of the baby that was still nursing. And I just teared up listening to that, you know, telling that story. But again, courage, you know, there was still fear. There's still fear today of people in certain areas as far as situations that are very similar to what some of the enslaved people went through.
Bernice?
Yes, I just want to go back to the question that was asked about how many people were served, and just want to mention, this is a pamphlet. This is the National Archives microfilm publication, and this pamphlet has several descriptions of the various reports that were submitted. And the federal government kept a lot of documents, folks. They kept a lot of documents because they had to talk about how the money was being used. You know, remember, we're not doing anything free. They had to talk about the monthly reports of the numbers that were issued rations.
It's military.
Yes, it's military. So yes, you will find that documentation in every state as to how many people were served by this bureau. I mean, that's what it's all about, you know?
Yeah, and just to touch on that, now it's time to talk about crucial portions of this collection that we use, that we want to call attention to. And if you're in the live chat room, this is the best part about watching the show live, is you get all the links of the things we're talking about. It's the best part, right? Gotta watch live or rewind it to find out what we're talking about. We are going to talk about gosh, I don't even know how to put it into the statement, really. There's a great resource on the National Archives website. I think a lot of folks overlook it. Bernice has the printed version of it that she was holding up. The record group is called Record Group 105. That's the Freedmen's Bureau records. But there are different subsections of that particular record group. The subsection that Bernice was holding up was M1905, which is my boo. I love M1905. That's Louisiana Freedmen's Bureau records. Okay, but every state is not under M1905. Each state is different. And so as I bring up the website that I just posted in the live chat room for everyone, let's talk about crucial record sets or crucial portions of this collection, you know, to you guys. Just throw out your absolute faves at this point.
Well, one thing I want to say before someone else says something, one of the things that I have learned from using Angela and Tony's site, which is the Mapping the Freedmen Bureau record, you can't look at this record set without looking at the the descriptive pamphlet. You have to understand what's in there. And I think my favorite is going through their site, and I look at the archives also, but being able to understand what actually is there, and also kind of how to maneuver through there, because you go through one link to another link. So for a site, I think mappingthefreedmenbureau.com is probably my favorite. And again, you want to use different resources because you might see something on one and might see something, you know, on another. So that's my plug for their site, because I'm trying to get Angela to come down to Charlottesville to present on it.
So actually, hold on. Let me interject here, because that is a resource. We're talking about the actual record set itself. So I'll share the site. For some reason, I don't know why, with you all's URL, the chat for the live chat is not allowing me to share the URL.
It's not letting me share them either.
Yeah, it won't let me share it, and I have the crown. I'm supposed to be able to do that. But this is Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau. This is something that was developed by BlackProGen Life panelists Angela Walton Raji, Tony Perrier. They're here tonight. And what this does is this provides you with a guide with regard to the Freedmen's Bureau the field office records and what you can find in those things. And the to me, the bang for your buck on this site is right here, which is the maps. And it gives you the ability to look at Freedmen's Bureau field office maps, and the map marks the sites of Freedmen's Bureau field offices and contraband camps. Those are key. Those are two huge record producing things. And then you've also got the hospitals that are here. You've also got USCT battle sites, slaves and freedmen of the Indian Territory, freedmen's bank branches. Remember, totally separate thing. Not the same as the Freedmen's Bureau. Okay. So if you go and click on the map, and this is the best part to me, because a lot of folks, we keep talking about the descriptive guide, right? Okay. We've got a descriptive guide that gives you information and intel on all the records that are available. So if you look here, and let me kind of zoom in to do the geriatric view, as I say. So little H stands for hospital, right? And then you've got a field office. We just click here for St. Joseph, Louisiana, right? You've got the field office, and then they've got the rolls of microfilm that this particular field office is on. You just click those and it'll take you right to the roll. I believe this is on Family Search, right, you all?
Yes.
Yeah, that might be Family Search. Yes.
Yeah, if you click that one, it's going to roll you over to Family Search.
Yes.
Oops,
So if you click it,
went to archive.org.
okay, it went to archive. So some of it
Okay.
goes to Family Search, some of it goes to the Internet Archive.
Internet Archive.
And then you can
right.
go through here and page through. And what we're talking about in terms of descriptive guide, right? Some of the links will have the descriptive guide right here. Of course, my son is acting a fool.
I just said it. We need to teach him how to research. I saw him holding Black Panther.
Yes.
That was awesome.
Yes, and he only does this when we do this. Only.
Oh, that's funny. Nika, could I point out that all of the descriptive pamphlets are on the Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau site? If you go up to the top navigation bar, see where it says Research Guides? Click on that, and then it'll pop you open a page, and then see down the left sidebar, you can select your area of research interest, and when you click on one, it opens the, there you go. It opens the link that will take you directly to the descriptive pamphlet. Ta-da!
There it is. And you know, another thing I like, and I know I'm talking about this site to death, but you know, it's how I locate the closest office to where my folks lived. Now it's going to take me time to go through these records, but I can judge, okay, which is the closest one. And it might be 2 or 3, or it might be one that's in the next county that, you know, from where they live. So you just never know. But, you know, and again, then I look at, oh my God, there's 4,000 pages in there, you know, or 4,000 records in there. So it's going to take time.
Absolutely. And just so you all don't neglect this, because people automatically think I can just go to the microfilm and find it. This is not that record set. Please, let me tell you, just as we talk about researching enslaved people will haze you, the Freedmen's Bureau will haze you if you don't get yourself together. So I'm just going to page through, of course, because, you know, I'm biased. I love M1905 because it's just the bomb. But this descriptive guide has got the folks that were part of the preservation project. You've got the introduction, which takes up several pages. I'm just paging through this. And then you get to, this is where you get to the good stuff. Please do not overlook this list of related publications. Please don't. Because this can help you. I can just tell you all that my breakthrough on my family did not come through record group M, or did not come through M1905. I did find some good things there, but I found better stuff in the pre-Bureau records in Mississippi. And the only way I would have even known to look at that was because I was reading through these different guides for these particular parts of the Freedmen's Bureau. So don't neglect these related records at the beginning where they have them. And then when you get down, go ahead, Angela.
Now I wanted to interject, go back to the previous page, because many times we hear, okay, all the records are done, they're indexed. There are many records that are not indexed and will not be indexed. But those pages that Nika was just showing with the M1275, Those are National Archive microfilm publications. A microfilm publication means that it is a reel of microfilm. And that all of those reels of microfilm that she was sharing, all of those are part of the larger entity known at the National Archives as Record Group 105. So it is important to understand that, yes, and in fact, print off your own descriptive pamphlet for your state.
Please do that. Please.
Print it off. It may be 20 pages, it may be 40 pages. Print it, bind it, put it together, highlight it, use it. But these other M numbers that she was just showing on the screen, make a note of them. Some of them you can only see at the National Archives. You may have to ask someone to see what can be done, take a look at them, because these records are also part of the collection. They're so valuable. So don't limit yourself to what's been indexed. Don't limit yourself to the Internet Archive, the M1905, 04, 08, whatever. Also understand there are a lot of other records that you haven't seen yet.
Absolutely. And the majority, as she said, a lot of this stuff is not indexed, meaning that, and let me come on. You can't put the name in a box and it's just going to come up.
Darn.
Nowhere.
Nowhere. Okay, that's not, oh, well, I could jump to family search, but I can go to no. This is hazing. I told you, you've got to go through the burning sands of the Freedmen's Bureau in order for you to understand what we're talking about. You can literally pull up something and think, oh, okay, I'll be able to get through this tonight. And then you get to the roll of microfilm and it's 2,000 images. And they're not indexed, and they're not in alphabetical order, or they're not in an order where all of St. Joseph, Louisiana is together and then all of St. Tammany Parish is together. No, some of this stuff is just far flung, and it literally is like somebody just had all the labor contracts and went like this and threw them, and then whatever order they laid in on the floor is what they were with. So so please do not think that. That's the reason why we're spending so much time telling you about these descriptive pamphlets.
Can I ask, I'm going to ask this as a question, so it's a clarification. Not everybody that was a slave, and we said it earlier, went and accessed these offices and these services. So it could have been someone that was already freed and not a slave that went to the office. So I just want to clarify that, Angela, Tony, or anyone, because there's someone that might think, oh, I'm only looking for a slave. But
understand, war devastated the South.
Right.
When Sherman's army marched through, they were leveling, burning houses, barns, seizing livestock. People of all colors were affected. If I zoomed in on the field office in Western Arkansas, Fort Smith, Arkansas, I know, and I've shown this in many presentations I've given, a majority of the people receiving rations in 1867 were not formally slaves. You find people from the Cherokee Nation, from the Choctaw Nation, white citizens from that region around and in Fort Smith. Understand, we've never seen war. Our grandparents never lived during the Civil War. So we are at least 3 and sometimes 4 generations from anyone who saw the havoc that the Civil War brought to the places where those battles occurred. Not just the infrastructure. Many places were leveled. That's why they refer to a piece of artillery as a Sherman tank. It takes everything down in its path. Well, Sherman's army took a lot of things in its path too. And many people were affected. People who were enslaved, free, regardless of color, they needed things. They needed health care. They needed food. They needed blankets. So it's important to understand that.
Thank you. Needed to find their babies and their family too.
And their children. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. So Bernice, you said you wanted page 30 of this?
Go up a level.
Yeah, this is literally, I'm still just on This is still M1905, but this is literally, you've got the role, the description of the role, like this, and every field office and every state is not going to have the exact same records. That's something that we have to also say. Some of the stuff will be specific to, you know, their particular uses. In this instance, in Louisiana, you've got weekly reports received from surgeons concerning cholera cases. You've got monthly reports of attendance employed, rations issued. I've even seen rations listed as permits, not rations. That's how I made my breakthrough, was through permits issued, not rations. You've got specific things that are specific to a particular plantation. In this instance, look at Bernie Plantation is mentioned here. You've got the date ranges that show up, other records of patients at Freedmen's hospitals. I mean, this just goes on and on and on. This descriptive pamphlet is hundreds of pages. I actually have the printed copy. And something that I do, this is something I would advocate to everybody else too. When I go through a roll and I've made sure that I've checked it double, twice, whatever, I put the date and I highlight it, because there are so many rolls of microfilm on this.
Yes.
You want to be sure that you're not going back 2 and 3 times looking at the exact same thing. So that's another reason why we're telling you to go back and you know, and read through and make sure you document. So in terms of record sets, you know, overarching, right? Nothing that's, you know, that's super duper not specific to a particular area. Oh, before we go there, I also want to show the viewers, I forgot about this as well. I had this open. This is the link that we sent into the chat. This is the African American Records Freedmen's Bureau webpage for the National Archives. And if you don't have this bookmarked, you need to have a bookmark. One of the reasons why I like it is because I can scroll down here and get to each section of microfilm that I'm interested in for the Freedmen's Bureau. And they've got the links to each one of the descriptive pamphlets for each state, the field offices, all that kind of stuff. And they tell you how many rolls of microfilm are a part of each collection. There's a history. They cover how to order microfilm, all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to make sure that we touched on that as well. And that's at the National Archives website. So let's talk about crucial record sets in this. Labor contracts, right? I would imagine for a lot of people, that's probably the biggest find that we have in here. Why are the labor contracts important?
They help you place your family at that moment in time, which is going to be 1865, 1866, 1867. Well, boom, right there, you're back beyond 1870 in finding out where your ancestor was. But in so many places, I know in South Carolina, this instruction was given over and over and over again when they started restoring properties to the former slaveholders. The instruction to the freedmen was, we would like for you to return to your former homes and make contracts with your former slaveholder as an employer. And so a lot, I know in South Carolina, and I've seen it in other places as well, a lot of the time, the people who made a labor contract with an employer had some connection to that slaveholder before emancipation.
A lot of times it comes right out and says who they were owned by in the labor contracts. It just comes right out and says it.
And in South Carolina, some of those labor contracts had to be rewritten only because the planters, they were basically putting them back into slavery.
Right.
You had to work 7 days a week. You had to work this many hours a day. And some of this was just downright illegal. They couldn't do that.
Right. And so it had to be approved by the agent. Every contract had to be approved by the agent. And if it was not approved, then they had to go back and rewrite that contract.
That's right.
Also cohabitation records, which was what James was talking about a little bit earlier, which were actually made into law in Virginia and North Carolina, but in the other states that you have to depend on them being held by the Freedmen's Bureau.
So when you access, say you access a record group, actually when someone went to the field office, what actually happened? Did they do an application? Did they get an interview? What was it? Because some said, are you married? Who are you? Who owned you? Some records don't have that. We got the letters that are out there. Was there a specific thing or process that happened when someone walked into the Freedmen Bureau? And I'm only saying that because hearing what everyone's saying there's different information on different records. So you want to try to tap into them, but was there some sort of initial application, or did they just go right to the record and say a registry, or you're under transportation, you're under a labor contract, or was it different in each state? Or did typical military, everything is going to operate the same regardless of what state you're in? So I want to know if the Freedmen's Bureau records basically happen the same way.
I think it was depending. Yeah,
okay. No, and I'm asking that for,
I don't think so.
because everybody searches, but military runs the same in every state. The operations might be different.
Now it does, but then
now it
depended
does.
on who your
but they got their
commissioner was.
instructions.
Yeah, it depended on who your commissioner was, how they felt about their job that they had to do. I mean, you think about these are military people. Now they're having to issue rations, settle disputes, do all that kind of stuff. And for some reason, that also may be why certain locations don't have any records at all. It'll be like a business card, but a whole set of Freedmen's Bureau records. And you're like, I spent all this time, finally got to the National Archives, and I have a business card. And it really depends on the attitudes. And if you're really interested in that, study up who the commissioner was and who was over that particular area. Find out about who they were as a person, and that will usually drive how the operations went, for their subordinates or subordinate offices of the Freedmen's Bureau.
And there was some infighting within the Bureau because of that, and mismanagement and same kinds of things you're going to see today. So I learned about a lot of that on newspapers.com, a lot of articles about General Howard and people going into the insane asylum, and it's all kinds of stuff crazy that was going on at the upper levels of the Freedmen's Bureau.
Understand when the Bureau was created. March of 1865. Lee did not surrender until April of 1865. The war wasn't over. At the beginning of the creation of the Bureau, everything was handwritten. 2 years later, the Bureau is now in full force. Now you see pre-printed forms, beautiful stationery. The Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands for the state of Arkansas, Indian Territory, and Missouri. But you didn't see that in 1865 when suddenly 4 million people were saying, oh my God, we're free now. Where do we go? What do we do? We're hungry. I've got to feed my children. I've got to find my children. So it depends upon what time the record you're looking at was created. They had to figure out a process and a procedure, then make it standard, because the military does like certainly procedure and process. But at the very beginning, I'm sure it was chaos. And in fact, especially dealing with those former slaves, just ask what was going on in Fort Monroe. I'm sure Selma could talk a lot about that. There was a lot of chaos. So
and I mean, all you have to do is look at the variation in the records from state to state, or even from field office within a single state, to know that everybody was doing things differently. And just as everything else was in chaos, here is this brand new operation that's gearing up and, in a state of chaos. And so a lot of people had to sort of manage on their own as far as inventing what the form was going to look like, or, what form to record it on. So yes, I think everything was really, really variable during that time.
And let's talk beyond. We talked about labor contracts. We talked about rations. This is where people were going to get food. I made my huge breakthrough thanks to 95 pounds of bacon. I will never, ever forget that in my life. That was my woo moment, because of the fact that one of my ancestors went and got rations. They got tobacco, they got a broom, and they got 95 pounds of bacon. And the location that they said that they were living at was the key to who the slaveholder was. And I literally have a page, single spaced, actually a page and a half, single space, where I tracked my great-great-grandfather from literally 1865 until 1919, where he died. Every single year I had a piece of evidence on him. And only one thing led back to that one person through that ration.
Wow.
One. So I just have to put that out there. Rations are good, and it's applications for rations. In this case, they just gave them the rations and they said how much it was. They didn't even fill out an application. At least I haven't found an application for that. Besides applications for rations, labor contracts, we talked about cohabitation records. What else are we talking about? Overarching ones that pretty much everybody can link onto.
One thing I think that also needs to be definitely not forgotten about is that you do have a certain level of scholarship that's out there that's kind of growing on Reconstruction. I think there's been a new interest in it since we've come past the 150th anniversary of the Civil War and whatnot. So I think learning about the actual history of the Freedmen's Bureau itself and of the local stations that were involved with it, what have you, is also important, because you may not have a record because, like was said earlier, the person may not have cared and they may not have been as thorough as somewhere else. But there were places where these people were literally fighting off the early burgeoning embryonic KKK and other organizations like that. I wanted to make sure I mentioned this book here that folks can get online, neither carpetbaggers nor scallywags. It's a history of Reconstruction in Alabama. There are a lot of books like that aren't as well known. Capital Men. There's another one, Black Politicians in Georgia During Reconstruction, where you can learn kind of about what was going on day to day with the Freedmen's Bureau and its interaction with state and local and federal government, that may also play a part in helping you figure out why you can't find records or where to go to find them in the first place. And also, I want to make sure I mention that, yes, Tyrone Craft mentioned earlier that on the chat that, yes, I did go to Howard, and General Howard was the head of the Freedmen's Bureau. So for the first time in BlackProGen history, I just want to say, HU,
on to other records. We're talking also, you got to bring up Register of Negroes, plantation inspection records. Let's not forget about the schools. Right, records. The school records, the fact that there were Freedmen's Bureau schools all over the place, super key. I think we can probably get into those maybe a little bit more deeply later on in the year when we have a show on historically Black schools and colleges and universities. I think that would be a good show to kind of terse that group out. And anything else?
Transportation reports. And Nika, before we leave, or could I just go back briefly to the rations request to say that sometimes in those rations requests, you will actually learn about elders who may not have lived to be enumerated on the 1870 census. And if I could just screen share really quickly, I'll show you.
While she's pulling that up, court records are there, plantation inspections, registers of Negroes complaints. We talked about those earlier. I found one where someone stole the horse of an ancestor of mine, and the Freedmen's Bureau field office person wrote a letter to bring back William Atlas's horse at once. And I'm like, where were you supposed to bring it back to? He didn't say where. Was it the office? So
here's the slide. This report was made in 1866. Look at the ages of these elders. Wow. 180, 100. So these are people who are listed at, now how can I get out of screen share? Go away now. Cancel. Okay, there we go. So these are people who may not live to be on the 1870 census. And we had one record that popped up that had 17 people named Singleton in Louisiana. And Bernice said, I know somebody who is looking for Singleton, and they actually went there and they found people in that one particular record that they didn't know were in their family, because this is possibly the only place that was recorded was on that rations list.
True. Well, yeah. I would say that's the place, that's the first place you find them, and the only place you find them recorded after they have been freed. They probably are documented as slaves. You just don't have a lead to get them back to that time period.
That's
So
right.
that, and then your huge clue may be there. Tony, we never saw the image. It was never screen shared, so I don't quite know what you did. If you can post a link to it in our chat, then I can show it to everybody else. Medical records were also there, transportation records. Anything else you guys want to throw out as crucial sets before we give Bernice the floor to talk about one of the finds that she had with her research in the Freedmen's Bureau?
Census of contraband camps.
Okay, this was a contraband camp. Yeah, see, what's crazy is, believe it or not, where my family's from in Louisiana, there was a contraband camp there, and where I live at right now, there was a contraband camp here. And I keep going to contraband camp places. And there's a community just south of where I live called Grand Junction, Tennessee, which is where they had a contraband camp, and a large number of folks that live in Grand Junction are descendants of people who were at the contraband camp.
Wow.
Even to this day.
Wow.
You literally can trace them back to people who were brought to that particular contraband camp.
Has that site been studied by archaeologists or anyone? What might remain of that site?
Girl, you know where I live.
Never mind.
Look,
Never mind.
We're a blue county in a sea of red. Let's just put it that way.
Oh my.
Yeah, there are only 3 counties in West Tennessee that are blue.
Right.
Memphis, where I live, and the one next to me. So, yeah.
President's Island was a contraband camp right outside of Memphis, downtown.
Yes, and let's talk about contraband camps, because people are like, contraband? Yeah, we're talking like shanks. No, we're talking about people. Slaves were considered contraband, right, of war, right? Just as they were burning cotton and doing things, they were confiscating slaves, putting them to work to do things for the Union Army. And so they would serve a number of different purposes. Where my family was from, Lake Providence, there is an actual Lake Providence, and Ulysses S. Grant got this amazing idea that he was going to store gunboats that were going to be part of the siege of Vicksburg in Lake Providence, which was just west of Vicksburg, Mississippi. And they had the contraband, or the slaves, digging literally a huge canal from the Mississippi River to Lake Providence, because it wasn't that far apart, and they were supposed to bridge the two together. And then they never did use it, and there was a huge gaping hole that stayed there up until the 40s or the 50s, until they filled it in. So each location, the contraband, they operated in different capacities. Anything else before we go to... All right, you guys are quiet. All right, Bernice, let's go ahead and talk about your find.
Okay. This is my ancestor, my great-great-grandfather, Peter Clark. He's sitting, and standing is his son. Peter Clark was born in 1855, and he died in 1909. Now, when you start talking about the Freedmen's Bureau, you really have to know who you're looking for. They're just not going to magically appear if you don't know who you're looking for. So I knew that I was looking for Peter Clark. But as all genealogists, you always start somewhere. So I started in the 1900 census, and I think I have that one up there, to see where was Peter Clark. And on this census, I have my grandmother, Becky, who's on here. Then I went to the 1880 census, continuing to look for Peter Clark, just to put him in a place at a particular time. By the way, this is Livingston Parish, Louisiana. So then go back one more, okay, to 1880. But then I started looking. Here's Peter Clark in 1880, and on this census is not only is Peter Clark there, but also my great-great-grandmother Rebecca and my great-grandmother Isabel, who is Peter Clark's daughter. Well, I couldn't find Peter Clark. I tried to find him in 1870 and could not find him, but I did find him in the 1868 labor contract in Livingston Parish. So if you go back a little bit further, that's a labor contract. And Peter Clark is on that labor contract. Could you advance the slide one more? he's on this labor contract with his mother. So now I have my 3 times great grandmother, Katie Clark.
Wow.
And I also found Peter's siblings. Peter's siblings included Ann Clark, Olivia Clark, Bob Clark, and Emma. So you can go further back, forward. The next slide, Nika. No, go back. Okay, forward, Nika. I want you to get to the page where we see them on the Freedmen Bureau. Now, one of the things about this particular Freedmen Bureau contract is that Katie Clark had to sign an agreement. And the agreement states that Katie Clark and her family agreed to receive the sum of $100 for their work for a year. Do you hear this? $100 for a year. And that they obligated themselves to work faithfully and to work a certain amount of hours per day. Now, they also agreed that they would not misuse or neglect the plowing stock, and they would be accountable if they did break something. This is really important to even find this information, because I then began to look for Peter Clark in the 1870 census. And because I could not find him in the 1870 census, I looked at the names. I looked at all of the names of the children, and I found him in Livingston Parish as Johnson. So that can tell you how significant it was for me to find my ancestor on this Freedmen Bureau labor contract. And it's just one of many examples that people could use to determine how valuable this Freedmen Bureau record could be in helping you connect the dots and find your ancestors, because I was definitely able to do that. And just as a little side note, I want to tell you that I have connected now with Peter Clark's grandson, and he has taken a DNA test, and I gave him the Freedmen Bureau record so that he could see his grandfather on the Freedmen Bureau record.
All right. All right. So last question, or sort of discussion-y for the evening. Has anybody else made any breakthroughs with the collection? I talked about mine and my bacon, and the way that led me back. I had a couple of different rations, and one listed Lake Providence, the other one listed Short's Place in Lake Providence. Well, who was Short? When I went down the rabbit to find who Short was, that's where I found the will. Inventory listed everybody by name. Took me 18 years to find it. And I mentioned I had documentation every year from 1865 to 1919. And bacon was what led me to it. Anything else anybody want to add before we get into Ask Mariah?
Yes. I got just I was going to screen share, but I'll have to read it to you now because my screen share didn't work. So I want to read you just 2 remarkable documents that we found that were absolutely amazing. This first one was on a rations request, and this was written by the former slave holder. He was writing to the Bureau to ask the Bureau to give rations to this family. And this says, the ages of Mary Wiggins' 4 children by her former husband, Josh Simmons. Well, first of all, that may not have been recorded anywhere else but in Freedmen's Bureau, that her former husband was Josh Simmons, and here she is, Mary Wiggins. But then it lists the names: Violet, a cripple, born on the 1st of February, 1851, Hector, Hagar, Elena. And then it says the above was taken from the plantation book. That just blew us away when we saw it. Wow. And then there was one more, and it was a rations request too, that said, I hereby certify that James Jenkins Freedman formerly belonged to my father. And since the war, has been living on the place as an elderly man and somewhat feeble. And it's signed by J. Calhoun Kane. And so all we had to do was go find out who J. Calhoun Kane's father was. And there we had the slaveholder. So it was amazing.
That's amazing. That's good.
Any other big breakthroughs with this collection? I honestly feel like we're on the cusp of a lot of people making them. It's just folks are scared to take the dive into these records because it just seems so overwhelming. You get that descriptive pamphlet and you're like, it's 200 pages. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. And you think, it's just so much easier to put a name in a box and have something come out. But we're telling you, if there's anything you pick up tonight, we're telling you, be brave and really find, start out with one roll, maybe one roll a week or every couple of weeks, and chip away at it. Maybe you have a research buddy where somebody's willing to take a look at half of it. You look at the other half of it if you have a lot of records to get through. I just think that there's just so much, but don't sit on your duff and wait for Family Search to index it, because I can pretty much guarantee you that's not gonna happen.
Well, I would just add to that. It is important to understand it's a massive collection. There are millions of pages, and those other reels of microfilm that you shared from the descriptive pamphlet that are so very, very useful. I think the most important thing to do is relax, take a deep breath and relax, and then just commit yourself to the process. Even if you just go through 100 pages, maybe 200 pages a day, especially when you're dealing with a large reel of microfilm that may have been digitized, then just say, hey, I'm just going to go through and click through and see what is there. I know when the state of Virginia, all of the records were digitized by Family Search in the beginning, and they were not indexed. But I know that Selma Stewart down there in Hampton Roads, she would take one reel at a time. She would look at maybe 200 or 300 or whatever pages a day and click through just to see what was there. One day she called me up and said, did you know that there were 400 people from Virginia sent to your home state of Arkansas to work on a contract for 2 years, and I have all of their names? That blew me away. Had she not just been committed to the process of just going through methodically and just seeing what is there, she wasn't looking for them, but I'm so glad that she found them. And I still have people trying to find the some of the names of the people who ended up staying. By 1870, these folks in Virginia liked the climate and remained there. So commit yourself to the process and just wait for those gems to just jump off the page.
Right. And I just want to make a comment. For those of you, I know my Louisiana people, you go and look at the parish where your ancestors came from. Just download the entire parish. I did that for Livingston Parish. I can tell you, I know where all of those plantations are located, and I know the people on those plantations. And when you start looking at those different records, you're going to connect the dots, because those were communities. And so whereas you may not find your ancestor, you will find somebody that's living in that community. So make it a community study.
All right. Thanks so much, panelists, for your expertise. And of course, as always, we want you all to be sure to tweet us, hashtag us, make sure to comment. Let us know what happens when you dive into these records, because we can guarantee you that you're going to find something. We know you are. All right, here is your favorite part of BlackProGen Live, Ask Mariah. This is the part of the show where you, the viewer, submit your questions, queries, conundrums, and more to the panel, and we weigh in live with research help specifically geared towards you. Panelists never see the queries beforehand, so you get a chance to see us work together live to help our Genia buds get past their brick walls. The link to submit to Ask Mariah is included in every single description of each episode of BlackProGen Live. So for tonight's episode, we have a query from Frances Moore. She's trying to confirm the ancestral connection to, quote, Benjamin. I said Benjamin. That is William and Benjamin together. Lord, I am sleepy. I'm tired. Benjamin. Oh,
Right.
Lord. Okay. William Benjamin, I guess it's Steves. He is a man of color who fought in the American Revolution through his grandson, William Benjamin Steves, 1836, aka Benjamin Steves. I am the great granddaughter of Agnes Steves, who was the daughter of William Benjamin. And in terms of what she's found, she said she found his mother, Sarah E. I guess that'd be Saint something, but not his father on his second marriage certificate. Records already found are 1850, 1860, 1870 census, death certificate, marriage certificate. Everything is in New Jersey. She has done 23andMe and Ancestry DNA. So we're trying to find or confirm an ancestral connection to William Benjamin Stives. Don't bash me for the name. Man of color, fought in the American Revolution through his grandson. This is through the connection she's trying to confirm. William Benjamin Steves, born 1836, aka Benjamin Steves or Stives. And then she is a great granddaughter of Agnes, who is the daughter of that particular William Benjamin. So we're looking, I guess we need to pull up the 1850, 1860, 1870 census schedule. Francis, if you're in the chat room, be sure to raise your hand so we know that you're there. And let's get started. Let's find William Benjamin or Benjamin.
I'm curious. Well, she's the great granddaughter of this woman whom she knows is the daughter of Benjamin Stives or Steves. Then I guess I'm curious as to what she's trying to confirm. Is she not sure that she has documented the fact that this lady is his daughter? Because if she's the great granddaughter of this lady, who is the daughter of this man, then I don't see that there's a disconnection. It sounds confirmed. What have I missed? Is there a document that she's missing to prove her relationship to the woman who's the daughter?
The way that it sounded to me was as though there was an inference made that this was the correct person, and that she's got a marriage certificate. I believe, I would imagine, since we're talking time periods, if this William Benjamin was born in 1836, his daughter maybe 1856.
Oh, I see. Maybe
you know what I mean? And then of course her marriage record would maybe potentially list her father's name, and then finding somebody that's got the same name would be a huge clue. But I don't think she's got anything to hang her hat on.
Okay.
It sounds to me, and I don't know, but it sounds to me like maybe she's possibly seeking or could be seeking membership, or maybe in DAR or something like that. I know DAR has their ancestor search database, so I pulled up William Steves or Stives on there, and it looks like there are some other applications that are associated with this particular veteran. So if she hasn't, I would definitely recommend looking at DAR, contacting them or going online. I believe you can actually access other applicants' folders to say, hey, these are other records and other research that's already been done on this particular person where others have tried to prove a relationship. So, and it looks like there's 2 other applications there. So maybe that's
Shelley. Maybe you can help us out there.
I'm waiting.
The DRC index. Yeah, the index. I think it's like $15 for non-members. They have that report as well for your ancestors, and you can order up to like 10 pages or more. Shelley, am I saying that right? And then it's like 10 for us.
Yeah. What I would go for first is to download the Forgotten Patriots book. And if you have any idea of what state he was from or where you assumed he fought, you can search it. It is now a PDF document. It's 800 and some pages, but it has every state and all if this person is of color. I might have missed that. If he's of color, he's going to be in the Forgotten Patriot book. And you can also get with the local DAR or search for free on their website and find out if someone has applied for membership in the DAR. But I would first go there, and then I would contact a local DAR chapter and ask for assistance. Not that you're going to come in, but some assistance, because we have worksheets and things like that that helps you walk through researching that lineage of that ancestor. So verify first that he was a patriot, and then go from there and do your genealogy research. He needs to be born between 1727 and probably 1767 or 8, well, maybe 65, in order to get in for the war as a soldier. So again, find out if someone else has filed. And if she's in the chat room, she can contact me and I can look in the database on DARs to find out if he's listed, or she can look on the PDF of the Forgotten Patriots and just put DAR on it.
I actually placed the link. She is in the chat room. I did place the link to the Forgotten Patriots book and to search the DAR website. I did do a search, and I do have the ancestor number for this particular person.
So that means somebody has applied under that person. And so she actually, like I said, could buy what they will give out public, like True was saying, and get a few pages. And again, she can always contact me. And that's my role with my DAR chapter, is helping people who assume or has some evidence that they have a person that provided a service, or they were actually a soldier, a patriot.
Can she clarify for us exactly what she was looking for?
Sure.
Was it her connection to William, or was she trying to confirm that her great-grandmother is connected to William? Because I wasn't sure.
She posted in the chat.
Yeah, in the
Okay,
chat she says, I cannot connect my great-great-grandfather with the original Steves or Stives through his father. So she's trying to get, like I was mentioning before, she's trying to get some concrete, proof, smoking gun, something. I would play around with this, with the DAR website. I'm just kind of looking at the records and the trail of lineage going back to this person that is a patriot from New Jersey, and just looking at the descendancy of the person who has applied and who is a member under his lineage. And that may, since they have documented proof and they have to provide it, and it has to have a trail going back, I would then look at those folks, those associated people, and see if your great grandmother and or folks that you're familiar with are around, living around, associating with these folks, because that would then give you, a decent clue.
And also, just as a side note, if he's in that database and you guys are saying he's on there, if he's there and she connects, if she goes and applies for DAR, she only has to come up to the connection, because everything else has been proven. So it's a little easier if they're already in there. And again, like Nika said, looking at that lineage, and it's going to be each generation going back to that patriot, and evidence that comes with it.
She says that there is a DNA cousin.
Okay.
Yeah, she does say that there is a DNA cousin.
A DNA cousin to what?
Well, that I'm just reading what she says.
Okay, Melanie. DNA cousin to what? I see her in the chat.
Okay.
But anyway, and again, that's another way to start. She can inbox me on Facebook or anything.
Or she can respond, because we emailed her to let her know that she would be featured tonight. So that would be
got your email. Great.
There's such a plethora of information.
Yeah,
the
because
town
there's
histories, and
yeah,
it's so much available that she can look for to get these connections to Agnes, to William. Is that who it was?
And to get that application will be a
Mhm.
gold mine for her if she connects to that ancestor. Because again, each generation is going to have backup evidence. It says, I'm the daughter of Calvin Murphy and Verna Warden. Verna Warden's is the daughter of so-and-so, and it goes all the way back.
Yeah, I had
And
to do 5 women, so imagine the records as you get further in the time.
Well, and that's something that's a point that's very important, is that this isn't just, they wrote down on a piece of paper and swore 3 times and kissed it to the sky and said, okay, I hope they accept it. This is documented proof.
Yes.
On paper that these relationships exist. So this is why you would want to spend the money to get the application, because then that way, you are legitimizing the connection that you believe that you have. Anything else before we move to close out the show?
I just want to say one thing, that the worksheet can work for everybody. It doesn't have to be for a patriot.
No.
I like to stress that a lot, that you can use that for any ancestor that you're researching. It's a good guide to keep you on track.
Absolutely. Like a timeline.
It is.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Well, Francis, let us know what you do or don't find, or if you need some more assistance. Do you have a research brick wall? Would you like help from BlackProGen scaling that wall? Submit your query today for Ask Mariah. The link is in the description of each and every episode of BlackProGen Live. Remember to be specific. Tell us everything you've searched so we don't duplicate efforts if you get selected, and cross your fingers when you press submit. You just may get chosen for one of our upcoming episodes. All right. Touching briefly on current events. Of course, we could not do current events and not talk about this. Goodness gracious. From the New York Times, and actually this number has gone up, you guys. It's over 400 million in a weekend when you count worldwide. The Disney Marvel movie Black Panther, which features, or which finds super heroic T'Challa, Chadwick Boseman, returning to his remote African kingdom to assume the throne, roared into theaters over the weekend as a full-blown cultural event, breaking box office records and shattering a myth about the overseas viability of movies rooted in Black culture. Global ticket sales by Monday will total an estimated 387 million, according to ComScore. Black Panther instantly became the top-grossing film in history by a Black director, Ryan Coogler, and featuring a largely Black cast. The previous record holder, Straight Outta Compton, which collected 214 million worldwide in 2015 over its entire run. That was the entire run of the movie. Like when it started in the movies and when it ended, it grossed 214 million. This movie grossed 387 in one weekend. Here's the question I have about this, because we've been talking about this nonstop. We started the show talking about it. Have you all seen it? And the second question is, what impact do you think this film is going to have on currently living generations and future generations?
Well, let me say this. First of all, I think it's quite appropriate that, another Bison is, achieving, okay? Another Howard man is up there, I just want to make sure I shout that out. But seriously, I think that there's, it's good because, now that people are actually seeing a Black superhero that's rooted in African culture and whatnot. It's something that, again, the younger people won't really know a time without it. Yes, we've had other ones before that. I always want to make sure, because we can't forget Wesley Snipes doing Blade and whatnot. That we can't forget that. But the fact of the matter is,
Blank Man,
or anyone else, or Bruce Leroy. I haven't seen all the memes and stuff.
Yes,
but
yes.
But this is the first one that has reached this plateau in terms of box office success. I mean, the other day I was in Target and I was thinking about my little cousin who's having a birthday party, and so I actually went and bought him a Black Panther toy.
I got
the same one,
which is part of the reason I did that. I really didn't do it just for him. I really did it because when I was a kid, they didn't have a Black Panther toy like that. So I just wanted to pass that on, and I hope that the future generations really appreciate it, because it's not just that he's a Black superhero, but that he's a superhero that's rooted in African cultural tradition to some extent.
Well, I think you're dealing with a bunch of boomers. I haven't seen it yet. I will get around to seeing it when I get around to seeing it, but I'm not a movie person, but I plan to see it. And even my husband says,
yes.
maybe I'll come with you when you go watch it. That is a miracle. So, but I haven't seen it yet. The fact that he will go to watch the movie too, but no, I haven't seen it yet, and I'll wait for the crowds to die
It's okay, because we can see it in Salt Lake City next week.
We really
down. You think
could.
so?
Yes, ma'am. I'm
We
just
really
trying to
showing?
get Angela. Nika, will you look at the note I posted to share that information?
Oh, yes. So Beverly Scruggs, one of the people in the chat room, actually has found a record. Since we mentioned the Freedmen's Bureau, she actually found something
Fantastic.
while the show was taking place,
Yay!
which is awesome. So we want to give her a shout out. Thanks for
Fantastic.
letting us
Yeah.
know, which is
Fantastic.
awesome.
Mahalo.
Fantastic. Yes, awesome, awesome, awesome. And she is on Hawaii time, so she still has 85 hours until she has to go to bed tonight. All right. Anything else before we wrap up, you all? Any parting words? Don't be scared of the Freedmen's Bureau. We promise it doesn't bite.
It's wonderful.
It won't come to you in your
Record Group
dreams.
105. Yes.
Yes,
That's it.
Record
Record
105
Group
is the
105.
bomb. It's awesome. We
That's
love
it.
it.
It's awesome.
And
Just keep looking.
You know, the biggest thing is if you make it to 1870 and if you stop, then something's wrong with you. You got to hit that Freedmen's Bureau to have a chance to go any further. You have to take a look no matter what. And nobody said it was going to be easy. Just got to do it. Like Nike said, just do it.
Just do it. And it's worth it.
That's right.
I'm still digging.
so
And
am
I'm
I.
not
So am
stopping.
I. So
Always.
am I.
All right, everybody. We've got a new look, a new theme, more shows to get you up to speed on things people of color and genealogy, family history related. Visit whoisnikasmith.com for a downloadable schedule so you don't miss a thing. And guess what? We've got something special up our sleeve for Roots Tech. It's not going to be our typical show. Are you interested in what it's going to be? If you are, stay tuned to my YouTube channel to see exactly what it is. And of course, it'll be posted next week at some point. But if you're wanting to make sure that you keep up with the next episode of our traditional show, be sure to check out Beyond Percentages. DNA tests for genealogy are now part of the permanent landscape in family history research. Did you know you can get much more info than what's on your fancy pie chart? Learn creative ways to find previously unknown relations of your ancestors, how to confirm or deny oral history, and how we use the tools offered by DNA companies to expand our own research. Watch and chat live during Beyond Percentages, Doing More with Your DNA Test Results, airing live Tuesday, March 13th, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. GEDmatch provides DNA and genealogical analysis tools for amateur and professional researchers and genealogists, and most tools are free. You will need to upload DNA and or genealogical data or GEDCOM file to make use of their tools. Jason Lee, MD, will walk the listeners through the basics of how to use tools at gedmatch.com to assist you in analyzing your DNA results. Tune in live for the basics of gedmatch.com with Dr. Jason Lee on the latest episode of the long-running Research at the National Archives and Beyond, hosted by BlackProGen Live panelist Bernice Bennett, this Thursday, March 8th at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. Also, check out the 426th episode of the African Roots podcast, due to be posted sometime, by its host, BlackProGen Live panelist Angela Walton-Raji. She has the freedom to post whatever she's going to post it. That's right. All right. Are you heading to Roots Tech? If so, you're going to be there next week, right around this time, probably. Don't miss BlackProGen Live panelist sessions, which include Tony Carrier's The Ancestors Await, Finding Your Ancestors Through Archival Research. Shelley Murphy's presenting Timelines Are For You More Than Once. Bernice Bennett is going to talk about the emotional side of DNA testing. I'll be covering tracing slavery with DNA and genealogy. And Angela Walton-Raji is going to be presenting Essential Records for Native American Genealogy. You can catch those sessions, and you can also catch me, Shelley, Tony, True, Angela, Bernice, Tasia, and Willie in the house for all things tech and genealogy. Be sure to chat with us to get a BlackProGen Live ribbon for your badge, and stop by Expo Hall booth 133 for the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute just to see what we're up to. And of course, we have to give you a reminder again, just in case you missed last week's episode, please, please, please check out these podcasts and shows. Uncivil is a new history podcast from Gimlet Media, where we go back to the time our divisions turned into a war and bring you stories left out of official history. Get new episodes on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. In 1967, the Supreme Court decision Loving versus Virginia overturned all laws forbidding interracial marriage. The Living Generation tells the story of how a generation of Americans born to one Black and one white parent experience race and identity. Check out new episodes on Facebook, and they actually just posted a new one today. Also, Ben Franklin's World, Shelley Murphy's favorite, is a show for people who love history and for those who want to know more about the historical people and events that have impacted and shaped our present day world. Get new episodes on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. We also want to remind you, get the Lowdown by BlackProGen. Subscribe to get the collective feed of our blog posts, radio shows, podcasts, BlackProGen Live episodes, and more. Look for the subscription link in the description of every BlackProGen Live episode. Also, don't forget to join the conversation now. Participate in the live chat on YouTube to the top right hand of the screen. Don't forget, it's going to go up in a puff of smoke when we end the show. And be sure to weigh in permanently on Twitter by tweeting us at BlackProGen or using the hashtag BlackProGen. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to True Lewis, who's going to bid you adieu for the evening.
All righty, Nika. Thank you for another great episode. And we just want to thank all our viewers. You're so much appreciated. And thank you for joining BlackProGen Live tonight. And keep the conversation going over at YouTube and Twitter. And we'll see you at Roots Tech. Bye. Good night.
BlackProGen Live.
BlackProGen Live.
BlackProGen.
Hello, everybody out there.
BlackProGen Live.
BlackProGen Live.
The unapologetic Black and people of color viewpoint.
The place where evidence tells the stories.